welcome to my bookshelf, and today I'm excited to share with you my review of Zenn Diagram by Wendy Brandt. So I'm really excited to review this because this was my first ever advanced reader's copy that I have received, and maybe my only one, we'll find out, but I entered a Goodreads giveaway and I actually won it, and they sent me this book. So I'm really excited now to share my thoughts and feelings with you. So if you're not aware, this book is about our protagonist, Eva Walker, and she's a math nerd. And that's one of the many things I really liked about this book, is that our main character loves math, and she realizes that's not going to make her super popular, but that doesn't mean she's not going to be who she is. She accepts that she's probably not going to have any more than her one best friend, Charlotte. And she's okay with that, as much as you can be, I guess. But Eva is not only gifted in math, she also has this ability. So when she touches, either people or objects with her hands, she has these fractals, as she calls it. And they're not exactly visions because she's not really seeing anything. It's almost like she just gets like a sense and this like understanding of all the emotional hard things that have happened to people in their lives. And so depending what the object is and how emotionally charged the person is while handling that object, the more she can get from that object. And so Eva uses her ability to try to understand people's issues with math, because normally you're typing things into a calculator and you're trying to figure things out and they just don't make sense. And when Eva touches the calculator that you've been using, she can kind of get a glimpse into what kind of math-related issues that you're having, because most people don't carry around their calculators all the time. It's not something that they use very often. And I don't know if it was the math or just Eva as a person, but I felt really connected to her, more so than I think I ever have with a character in a book. A lot of the things that she mentioned or were thinking about or even said were things that, at least in some version of myself, I would want to say, or I have already thought, or, etc. I really felt connected to her, and I felt like, wow, I'm pretty similar to her in a lot of ways, but, I'm also very different than her in a lot of ways, but I still feel this, connection to her as a character, which I really appreciated. I think it's hard to find a character that really hits home to you as a person. I think that there's a lot of things that are just common human experiences, and maybe that's just what this is, but I don't know. It was just really nice to read about a character that I identified with. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this book is that we're introduced to Eva's power immediately. And what I liked about it was that it wasn't just dropped. It was something that was continually talked about throughout the story. It's not something that only came up when the plot needed it to, for, drama's sake or something like that. It happened, I think, in almost every scene where there's at least some kind of mention about how this fractal ability affects her life. Because a lot of times I think authors, they talk about the struggles of their abilities or whatever towards the beginning, but then you see situations where you would assume that their ability would come into play, but then it's just forgotten about until, again, the plot needs them to remember that they have this ability. But I like that this book didn't feel like that. At least I didn't find any instances where it was ignored. In fact, there were a lot of scenes where I almost forgot that, oh yeah, of course this would be an issue for her. I just didn't really think that hard about it. And then, the narrative mentioned it. And I really like that there were scenes that didn't even really matter to the plot, but it was still being brought up. For instance, she talks about, I think she went to the library and she's trying to type on the computers, but she specifically talks about having to, type on the keyboard with a pencil because she doesn't want to touch the keyboard because who knows what kind of fractals might be there. And those kinds of little details mean a lot to me as a reader. And I appreciated that she made it just be a part of who Eva was as a character, and that it wasn't something that was ever forgotten about. And on top of that, it's just really nice to have a book about a smart character. A lot of times characters do lots of really dumb, stupid things, and I'm sitting there yelling at our protagonist. But I like that this book wasn't like that. It seemed a bit more realistic than I think most books about teenagers are. I mean, at the same time, I realized that there are things that, are not realistic. For instance, disability. But I like that it's almost like magical realism in the sense that, like, okay, assuming that this is possible and this person has this ability, what would this actually look like for this person? And I think she follows that through really well. And of course, I can't talk about this book and not talk about Zenn. He is the love interest of Eva, and they're just so cute together. And I love that both Zenn and Eva throw a lot of puns at each other, and there's just a lot of laughing involved, and it just seems like a relationship that I've had with people before. And I just know for me personally that humor is an important part of any kind of relationship, because humor is important, laughing is important, having fun is important. Obviously, it shouldn't be the only thing that you do, and I like that that is true with these characters as well. They do laugh a lot, but they do also talk about serious topics as well. So I appreciated that they were somewhat well-rounded. Alright, so now that I've gushed about this book, I want to now just be honest and talk about things that I was a little unsure about. And not that these are horrible things about the book, but just that there were things that I had some issue with. So our main character, Eva, really wants to go to college, but she keeps talking about how she can't afford to go to college, and she's actually kind of afraid to even put out college applications because she's actually worried that she's going to be accepted but then not be able to go because her parents don't make enough money to send her to college, because her parents have quadruplets on top of having her as well. So there's a big plot point in this book about her trying to get this scholarship in order to pay for college. Now, admittedly, I think it's really cool to apply for scholarships. Like, of course, that's awesome. I didn't have any problem with that. My problem was, I mean, Eva is a very smart girl, and I just found it strange that financial aid was never mentioned in this book. Like, I do understand that, yes, I don't think that most people's parents can afford to send their kid to college. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you can't go to college. That, to me, is like, really? Not even gonna mention it. Like, I also understand why you wouldn't want to have huge loan debt. But at the same time, I know that the majority of students, including myself, who go to college, get financial aid and are in debt. It's just kind of the way the world is at this point. So it just seems strange to me that financial aid was never mentioned. Actually, if your parents don't make that much money, you tend to get more grants than you do loans. But most people kind of hit that sweet spot where their parents make too much money to get more grants, even though in reality they're not able to actually help you pay for college. It's just that, whatever arbitrary number that the government comes up with, your parents make too much, even though in reality they still can't help you with college, so sorry. But that doesn't mean they still don't help you. I mean, they give you loans, and obviously that's not ideal. It would be nice to just have a grant so you don't have to pay it back, but I personally don't know a single person who is going to college because their parents have paid it for them. In fact, none of my friends anyway are able to get anything from their parents for college, including myself. My parents gave me zero money for college. And yeah, it sucks. I have student loans, but I also have a degree. That's just kind of how you have to weigh it out. If you want to go to college, you're going to have debt. That's just how it works. And I don't have a problem with her still applying for the scholarship. I just thought it was weird that it wasn't even mentioned. Like, yeah, I know you can do financial aid, but, if I didn't have to, it would be nice to get a scholarship. And I can get behind that because, yes, it's true. If you think that you have what it takes to get a scholarship, then yeah, go for it. Apply for the scholarship. I would never tell someone not to apply to a scholarship. Like, the worst that happens is they say no. So to me, it was just something that I thought should have been mentioned in the book, but wasn't. And I was like, really? Okay. It would have taken, a sentence or two tops to just explain, what most people actually do to get into college, and it wasn't done. So that felt kind of weird, especially since the rest of the book seemed pretty intelligent. So that was just kind of frustrating for me as someone who has financial aid to just have it never mentioned. as if what I'm doing is completely bizarre and unusual and just like not even an option. That was just kind of frustrating to me, but again, not a huge deal, but just something that stuck out to me. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about was Zenn. And Zenn is almost like too perfect. That's kind of a weird thing to say, but he totally is. You know, he's working all these jobs so he can support his mom, who's a drunk, and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, he's just genuinely a good guy. And on top of that, you know, he's talented, he's an artist, he can paint, he's funny, and, you know, he's good looking, and, you know, he just has all these things going for him, and it's just like, what? This person exists, you know? It's just like, come on, real people aren't that perfect, you know? But at the same time, I mean, I say those things, but, I mean, his life is by no means perfect. I just kind of, you know, there are the things that make him look good, but, I mean, he is a good person, but that doesn't mean that his life is perfect by any means, because it's actually more the opposite. It really just shows his, like, resiliency and his determination to work hard and to not have to ask for handouts or anything like that, and that's the kind of person that I really, truly admire, which is why he seems so perfect to me, because I feel like there aren't that many people out there that are like that, at least that I have personally met. But it's just really cool to have that be our, like, love interest, you know, to have someone so hardworking and genuine and kind. So another thing I wanted to mention is the reason why I didn't give it a 5 out of 5 stars. I just gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I really think the reason for that is that it was a contemporary romance, which seems kind of weird to penalize a book for, like, the genre it's in, but I can't ignore that. I am not one of those people that will just completely reject reading a book because of its genre. I mean, I want to give every book a chance, you know, within reason. Obviously, there are certain things that you just know right off the bat you're not going to like, so why would you waste your time? But this just really had an interesting premise and some really interesting characters, and to me, it made it worth it, even though it did have those parts of romance in it that I'm just not a fan of. I don't know, I find it weird just to read about romance, you know, specifically like them making out and having sex. It's like, I don't need to read that, to be honest. And I do appreciate that it wasn't like completely over the top in this book. I've read a lot worse, so I did appreciate the level of it that was in here. I wish it was a little less, but that's just my personal preference. You know, even though it's a part of a story that I usually can't stand, I was still able to pretty much read it all the way through. I did kind of, you know, skim over some parts, but overall I did read all of it, so that is again a testimony to just how much I enjoyed her writing. Yeah, and I felt like towards the end it kind of became a little bit too much about the making out and things like that. Like there were times where like they hadn't seen each other in a long time, and it sounded like they just really needed to talk about things, but instead they just like made out, and I was like, I do understand that's kind of the human tendency to avoid talking about hard topics. You'd rather just like make out. So it's realistic in that sense, but at the same time I'm like, really? I do understand it, but it still doesn't make me like reading about it anymore. Things like that kind of bothered me. So overall, I really liked this book. It was really fun in a lot of parts, and quirky and relatable, and while there were some things that were kind of cliche and kind of, you know, like awfully convenient, it was still just an enjoyable book and an enjoyable read. It's not exactly the most deep book in the world, but at the same time, it's not completely light. We do talk about some dark topics in here as well, and I appreciated that it had this kind of light tone while discussing some of these dark things as well. So I guess my overall thoughts are, for a contemporary romance book, it was still a lot of fun for me. I like that the characters are unique, at least from my experience. I haven't read characters quite like this before, and I did enjoy the unique storytelling element of Eva having this fractal ability. That's also something I've never seen before. So I thought I had a lot of fun elements thrown in there, and it was really cute and funny at parts, but it also had some dark themes as well. So there were a lot of things in here that I just really appreciated as a reader. They just kind of hit my preferences. So even though I didn't give it 5 out of 5 stars, it's still a book that I would reread actually, even though it's a 4-star book for me. I thought it was a lot of fun. So if any of this sounded interesting to you, I would definitely recommend reading this. Alright, so that was my review of Zenn Diagram by Wendy Brandt. It was a lot of fun to read and a lot of fun to share with you, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time.